I was mid-toast at my own wedding reception when my mother stood up, smiled too wide, and said the words that detonated my entire life. Before we celebrate too much, I think everyone deserves to know the truth about whose child that really is. The room went silent. Forks clattered onto plates. My champagne glass froze halfway to my lips. I looked at my new husband, Nathan, expecting him to laugh it off, to defend me, to do something. Instead, he slowly set down his glass and looked away. That silence told me everything. My mother wasn't done. She turned to the crowd of 150 guests, friends and family who'd traveled from 3 states to be here, and said it louder. My daughter's son, the ring bearer you all thought was so precious, isn't Nathan's biological child. And she's been lying about it for 8 years. Someone gasped. My 8-year-old son, Oliver, was sitting at the kids' table 10 feet away, surrounded by cousins who were now staring at him like he'd suddenly grown horns. I waited for Nathan to speak, to tell my mother she was crazy, to stand up for me, for Oliver, for the family we'd supposedly just committed to building together. He said nothing, just sat there, jaw tight, eyes fixed on his plate like it held the answers to questions I didn't even know he'd been asking. My mother continued, her voice dripping with false concern. I'm only saying this because I care. Nathan deserves to know what he's gotten himself into. The whispers started then, spreading like wildfire through the reception hall. I could see guests exchanging looks, pulling out their phones, leaning toward each other to murmur behind their hands. My best friend, Casey, stood up from her table, face red with fury, but I shook my head at her. Not yet. Because in that moment, watching my mother's performance and my husband's silence, I realized something cold and clear. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. That's when I noticed the guests weren't just staring at me anymore. They were looking at Oliver. My sweet, sensitive boy who loved dinosaurs and building Lego cities and who'd been so excited to carry the rings down the aisle. He was frozen in his seat, face pale, not understanding the words but understanding the tone, the stares, the sudden shift in the room's energy. A cousin whispered something to him. Oliver's eyes found mine across the room, confused and scared. Something in my chest cracked open, not sadness, rage, pure, protective rage. My mother had crossed a line I didn't even know existed. You can humiliate me, you can ruin my wedding, but you don't make my child feel like he's something shameful. I stood up and the room went even quieter. My mother smiled, thinking she'd won, thinking I was about to confess, to break down, to prove her right in front of everyone. Then someone clapped, just once, slow, deliberate. I turned and saw Nathan's aunt, Helen, the family matriarch, nodding approvingly at my mother. Brave of you, Helen said, her voice carrying across the silent room. Someone needed to say it. 2 more people clapped. Then someone at Nathan's family table said, Poor Nathan, he deserves better than this. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. This wasn't just my mother's ambush. This was coordinated. I looked at Nathan again, and this time, he met my eyes. There was no surprise on his face. No shock. No confusion. He'd known this was coming. My own husband had known my mother planned to destroy me at our wedding reception, and he'd let it happen. He'd sat there and let her call me a liar in front of everyone we knew. Let her humiliate our son. Let his family join in like this was justice instead of cruelty. Nathan finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but everyone heard it in the dead silence. Maybe you should just tell them yourself, Vanessa. He said it like I was the one being unreasonable. Like I was the one causing a scene by not immediately confessing to a lie I'd never told. We got married today because I love you. But if there's something you need to say, now's the time to come clean. Come clean. Like I was guilty. Like he was being generous by giving me a chance to confess. I stared at him, this man I'd been with for 8 years, who'd proposed on bended knee, who'd cried when I walked down the aisle 2 hours ago, and I understood with perfect clarity that I'd married a stranger. Or worse, I'd married exactly who he was and had been too hopeful to see it. My mother was smiling. Actually smiling. Like she'd orchestrated a victory instead of a public execution. The room waited for me to break, to cry, to confess to whatever story they'd decided was true. But I didn't speak yet, because I was remembering something from 4 months ago. A conversation in my mother's kitchen when she'd cornered me during a Sunday dinner. She'd asked, casual as anything, if I'd ever gotten a paternity test for Oliver. Just for peace of mind, she'd said. So there's never any question. I'd told her it was insulting. That Nathan had been there from the beginning. That Oliver was his son in every way that mattered. She'd smiled that same smile she was wearing now and said, if there's nothing to hide, then there's no harm in proving it. I'd refused. Walked out angry. Didn't speak to her for 2 weeks until she apologized. Except she hadn't been apologizing. She'd been planning. This moment. This public destruction. She'd asked for the test so she could use my refusal as proof of guilt. My hand went to my small wedding clutch on the table. White satin, barely big enough for my phone, and lipstick and one other thing. An envelope. Small, cream-colored, sealed. I'd carried it with me down the aisle, through the ceremony, through the photos. Just in case. Because my mother had asked about that test one too many times. Because Nathan had started asking careful questions about timelines 3 months ago. Because I'm not stupid, and I know when people are building a case against me. I pulled out the envelope slowly. The room leaned forward. Even my mother's smile faltered for just a second. You want the truth? I asked, my voice steady. Let's talk about the truth. Nathan went pale. Actually pale, like he'd just realized this wasn't going the way he'd planned. My mother's eyes narrowed. Vanessa, don't make this worse by what? I interrupted. By defending myself? By showing everyone what you're really doing? I held up the envelope but didn't open it yet. My mother's voice got sharp. That's probably fake. She forged it. She's done it before. The accusation was so absurd, I almost laughed. Done it before? I'd never forged anything in my life. But the guests didn't know that. Some of them were nodding like it made sense. Like I was the type of person who'd fake paternity results. Nathan shifted in his seat. The officiant, a family friend who'd performed the ceremony, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should continue this privately, he suggested gently. Like this was a minor disagreement and not a complete implosion. I looked at Oliver again. He was crying now, silent tears running down his face while his cousins stared at him. And I made a decision. I could walk out, take my son and leave. Let them believe whatever they wanted. I stood up, picked up my clutch, started to walk toward Oliver. The room stayed silent, watching me like I was confirming their worst assumptions by leave. I got 3 steps before I saw Casey. She was crying, angry tears, hands clenched into fists. She mouthed something to me. Don't let them win. I stopped, because she was right. If I left now, my mother's story would become the truth. Oliver would grow up hearing whispers about how his mom ran away instead of facing the facts. Nathan would tell people he'd been tricked into marriage. My mother would play the concerned parent who only wanted honesty. I turned around and walked back to my seat. Sat down, placed the envelope on the table in front of me. You want the truth? I said again. Then let's go through the timeline. Carefully, my mother's smile returned. Sweetheart, you don't need to embarrass yourself further. I ignored her and looked at Nathan. When did we start dating? He blinked. October 2017. And when was Oliver born? March 2018. So, 5 months after we started dating. I watched the math register on people's faces. Which means I got pregnant when? Nathan's jaw tightened. December 2017. December 2017, I repeated. 2 months into our relationship, when we were already together, already exclusive, already in love. I turned to my mother. Mom, you remember December 2017, right? You were at our apartment for Christmas. You met Nathan's parents. Her expression flickered, just for a second. But I saw it. That doesn't prove anything, she said. You could have been seeing someone else. The accusation hung in the air. Someone at Nathan's family table nodded. I smiled, actually smiled, because she'd just walked into the trap. You're right, I said. I could have been. So let me ask you a question about dates. I kept my eyes on my mother. Let me explain the timeline very clearly. Nathan and I started dating in October 2017. I got pregnant in late December 2017. Oliver was born March 18, 2018, 3 weeks early. I paused. Now where was Nathan from November 28th to December 10th? Nathan's face went pale. My mother looked confused. He was in Seattle for a work conference, 2 weeks. He came back December 11th. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the wedding screen. Text messages appeared from that trip. Miss you? Conference is boring. Can't wait to see you. Every message dated late November through early December. Nathan came home December 11th. We spent that entire week together. I got pregnant December 15th through 18th. I looked at Nathan. But you thought I got pregnant while you were gone, didn't you? You did the math wrong because Oliver came 3 weeks early. You thought conception happened in early December when you were in Seattle. His face confirmed it. So you convinced yourself I cheated, when really, you just can't count pregnancy weeks correctly. My mother's mouth opened and closed. She was scrambling, I could see it. Maybe the dates are wrong. Maybe you got pregnant earlier. The doctor confirmed conception date, I said calmly. Mid to late December. I have the medical records if you want to see them. I turned back to Nathan. But here's what's interesting. You accused me of cheating in January 2018. Remember that fight? He went rigid. You said I was distant, that I must have been seeing someone else while you were in Seattle. You were so convinced, so angry. I paused. Want to tell everyone where you actually were in Seattle? The room was dead silent now. Nathan's face had gone from pale to red. That's not. You were with Autumn. The name dropped like a bomb, his ex-girlfriend. The one he'd sworn was ancient history. The one he'd promised he never talked to anymore. A woman I'd barely noticed stood up from one of the back tables. Autumn Hayes. Dark hair, perfect makeup, designer dress. I hadn't invited her. Hadn't even known she was here. But of course she was. Nathan had probably invited her himself. I think I should explain, Autumn said, her voice carrying across the silent room. She looked at Nathan, then at me. Nathan called me in November 2017, said he missed me, wanted to see if we could work things out. My stomach dropped. Not because I didn't know. I'd found out months later. But hearing it said out loud in front of everyone made it real in a different way. We met in Seattle, Autumn continued. He told me he was dating someone new, but it wasn't serious. We spent the week together. He begged me to take him back. She paused. I said no, and he got angry. Really angry. Started accusing me of cheating on him years ago when we were together. Autumn looked at me with something like pity. When he got back to you, he projected everything onto you. Classic guilt displacement. He cheated, so he convinced himself you must have too. The room erupted in whispers. Nathan tried to speak, but no sound came out. My mother looked between us, her narrative crumbling. I picked up the envelope, opened it slowly, read the results out loud. DNA paternity test results. Alleged father, Nathan Pierce. Child, Oliver Pierce. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's face went white. Nathan stared at the table. I wasn't done. This test was done 3 months ago, privately, through a certified lab, because you kept asking, Mom, kept implying, kept making me doubt myself even though I knew the truth. I pulled out a second paper. But here's what's really interesting. This is a second test. Want to guess when it was done? I held up the second document. Oliver was 6 months old, September 2018. Someone ordered a paternity test without telling me. I looked directly at my mother. Want to guess who requested it? Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. You did, Mom. You forged my signature, took a sample from Oliver during one of your babysitting days, and sent it to a lab. The room gasped. Even Nathan looked shocked. I found the receipt in your desk when I helped you move apartments 3 years ago. Found the results too, filed away in a folder labeled medical records. I read from the paper. Results. 99.97% probability Nathan is the biological father. Dated September 15, 2018. I looked at her. You've known for 7.5 years that Nathan is Oliver's father, and you still stood up today and called me a liar. The accusations in her eyes turned to panic. She'd been caught. Completely, undeniably caught. Why would you do this? Someone asked from the crowd. Casey, probably. My mother tried to recover. I just wanted to be sure, to protect Nathan. This has nothing to do with Nathan, I said. My voice was steady, but something cold had settled in my chest. This is about control, about punishing me. I looked at the guests. My mother has resented Oliver since the day he was born, not because of paternity, because having a child meant I couldn't drop everything for her anymore. Couldn't be her emotional support system every time she had a problem. My mother's face twisted. That's not. I got my own apartment, started setting boundaries, stopped answering midnight phone calls about her latest drama, and she hated it. I held up my phone again, screenshots this time. These are text messages from last month, her and Nathan, planning this exact moment. The screen showed message after message. Nathan asking how to handle the announcement, my mother coaching him on what to say. Nathan finally snapped, but not at my mother. At me. "You're the one ruining everything," he shouted, standing up. "We could have handled this privately, but you had to make a scene." I stared at him. We'd been together for 8 years. 8 years of building a life. Of raising Oliver. Of planning this wedding. And he thought quietly letting my mother humiliate me was the better option. "You planned this with her," I said, my voice calm. "You knew she was going to do this at our wedding, you helped her." He didn't deny it, just looked away. That told me everything. I thought about all the questions he'd been asking lately, about timelines, about where I was in December 2017, about whether I was sure Oliver was his. I'd shown him the paternity test 3 months ago when his questions got weird. Clear proof, official results, and he'd still chosen to believe my mother's lies. I stood up, took off my wedding ring. It was beautiful, white gold with tiny diamonds, the ring I'd dreamed about for months. I placed it carefully on the table between us. "This wedding is over." The room erupted. Guests shouting, Nathan reaching for me, my mother screaming something I didn't listen to. I walked to Oliver, who was still frozen at the kids' table, knelt down in front of him. "We're leaving, baby, and everything's gonna be okay." He wrapped his arms around my neck and I picked him up, even though he was almost too big to carry. Casey appeared at my side. "I'm coming with you." Then Nathan's cousin stood up. Then 2 of my co-workers. Then Casey's husband. Then my uncle. People were choosing sides, and more of them were choosing mine than I'd expected. We walked toward the exit, and I didn't look back. The hotel hallway was chaos. People following me, asking if I was okay, offering places to stay. Nathan's voice behind me, begging me to come back, to talk, to think about what I was throwing away. I kept walking. Casey's car was already waiting. She'd somehow texted her husband to bring it around. That's the kind of friend she was. We drove to her house in silence. Oliver fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the emotional storm. My phone was already blowing up. Texts from guests, calls from relatives. My mother calling over and over until I blocked her number. But there were other messages too. Nathan's family members apologizing. Friends saying they'd suspected something was off. My uncle saying he was proud of me. By the time we got to Casey's house, the story had already shifted. People who'd witnessed it were posting on social media. Not about my supposed lies, about my mother's scheming, about Nathan's betrayal. I woke up the next morning to 47 missed calls and a flood of messages. The wedding venue had called, asking what to do with the decorations. The caterer wanted to know about payment. Nathan had texted 23 times, each message more desperate than the last. But the most important messages were from his family. His cousin, "I'm so sorry, we should have questioned this sooner." His aunt, "Helen was wrong, we all were. Please forgive us." Even his mother, "Nathan told me the whole truth this morning, about Seattle, about planning this with your mother. I'm horrified." The story was completely unraveling. Nathan had apparently broken down after I left and confessed everything. How he'd been insecure about Oliver from the start. How my mother had fed that insecurity. How they'd planned to use the wedding as leverage to make me admit to cheating so he could control the narrative of our relationship going forward. By Monday, I'd hired a lawyer, filed for annulment based on fraud and emotional cruelty. Filed for sole custody with supervised visitation only. Nathan tried to fight it, sent me threatening messages about taking Oliver away, about telling everyone I was unstable, about making my life hell. That was his first mistake. I saved every message, every threat, every attempt to intimidate me into dropping the legal action. His second mistake was underestimating what I'd kept. I had the screenshots of his messages with my mother. The receipt for the secret paternity test she'd ordered. The texts where Nathan admitted to cheating in Seattle. Documentation of every lie, every manipulation, every coordinated attack. My lawyer was practically gleeful. "This is the easiest custody case I've ever had," she said. "He's handed you everything you need." The annulment hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. Nathan's lawyer tried to argue for reconciliation. Mine presented the evidence. The judge granted the annulment in 20 minutes. The final blow came when I released the full story. Not on social media. I'm not that person. But when Nathan started telling people his version, painting himself as the victim of a crazy ex-wife, I sent one group message. To his family, to our mutual friends, to everyone who'd been at that wedding. 3 screenshots. The texts between Nathan and my mother planning the wedding ambush. The receipt showing my mother had secretly done a paternity test 7 years ago that proved Nathan was Oliver's father. Nathan's confession texts where he admitted to cheating in Seattle and lying about it. I didn't add commentary. Didn't explain. Just let the truth speak for itself. The response was immediate. People who defended Nathan went silent. His own family members called him out publicly. My mother's friends started distancing themselves. The narrative they'd tried to build collapsed completely. My mother's world fell apart slowly, then all at once. First, her book club stopped inviting her. Then the charity board she'd been on for 15 years asked her to step down. Her church friends started avoiding her calls. The country club where she'd been a member for 20 years quietly suggested she might be happier elsewhere. She'd built her entire identity on being the perfect mother, the pillar of the community, the woman everyone admired. And now everyone knew the truth. She'd forged documents, manipulated her daughter, tried to destroy her own grandson's sense of security for the sake of control. She tried to apologize, sent flowers, left voicemails crying about how she'd made a mistake, how she just wanted what was best for me, how we could fix this if I'd just talked to her. I didn't respond. Some bridges you burn on purpose. Some people don't deserve a path back into your life. 6 months later, Oliver and I moved into a small house across town. 2 bedrooms, a backyard, a neighborhood with good schools and kids his age. We got a dog, a golden retriever puppy Oliver named Rex. Started therapy, both of us, to work through what had happened. Oliver stopped having nightmares about people staring at him. Started laughing again. Stopped asking if he was really wanted. I got a promotion at work. Started dating again, casually. Learned to trust my instincts about people instead of ignoring red flags because I wanted to believe the best. Casey and her family came over every Sunday for dinner. My uncle called every week to check in. Even some of Nathan's family members reached out, apologizing, asking if they could still be part of Oliver's life. Some I said yes to. Others I didn't. Life got smaller in some ways, quieter, but it also got clearer. Safer. Mine. Last week, my mother sent a letter. Handwritten, 6 pages long, begging for forgiveness. She said she'd been in therapy. Said she understood now why she'd done what she did. Said she wanted a relationship with her grandson. I read it once, then put it in a drawer and haven't thought about it since. Because forgiveness isn't something you owe someone just because they ask for it. And reconciliation isn't required just because someone regrets their choices. Oliver asked me last night if we were ever going back to the old house, the old life. I told him no. We're building something new, something better, something that's just ours. He smiled and went back to building his Lego city. And I realized that was the real ending. Not revenge, not dramatic confrontations, just peace, just boundaries. Just a life where the people who love us actually show up. That's the win, that's the victory, and it's more than enough.